The first speakers today are two of the most amazing people. Paula Bacon are here today, and she's going to be speaking with Vickery Eckhoff, who writes for Forbes and other publications. Vickery has written a series of articles over the past year exposing horse slaughter. And, you know, it's funny, when I was talking to her, she said to me that, you know, she didn't realize that I've been involved with this issue for 20 years. It was 20 years ago that I rescued my first horse from slaughter. You know, and I said to her, I'm really so tired of this. I really would just like this to go away so we can concentrate on productive things. And she said, 20 years. She said, I didn't realize you were involved that long. I'm only involved with it a short time, and I'm tired of it. So, but we need Vickery and people like her to keep getting the news out.
Okay. So, pardon my French. Over the last year that I've been working on this, and I'm probably one of the latest comers to this discussion. Back in 2011, I think, before the Farm Bill was signed that took the defunding language out of it, I saw an article in the New York Times, and in it, Paula Bacon was one of the commenters. And I had been thinking for a while that I wanted to address this topic. I was working at Forbes, and I was working at Forbes in the marketing department, actually. My background is as a copywriter. But I've worked for the media for a very long time as a copywriter, promoting coverage. And it was while I was at Forbes that I had the opportunity to become a contributor. So they brought me on board, and one of the things you'll hear about from me today is how the media is shifting. You no longer have large staffs at media companies. You have very small underpaid staffs, and then you have a lot of contributors. And the contributors that get a lot of traffic on an article will get paid for it. And the contributors that get less traffic do a lot of work and don't get paid for it. Which one do you think I am? Very devoted audience, very knowledgeable audience, but just as a basis of comparison, I spent a month researching a story on wild horses, which is a really complicated issue. And the day that I published that article, they announced that Snooki was pregnant. And she got 60,000 views, and that writer got paid. And I got, I think, 3,000 views, and I did not get paid. But anyway, I don't do it for that. I do it because it's very, very upsetting to me to be a member of the media and to see 99% of what comes out be that. So, disinformation. We all have an opportunity to counter this with social media. By becoming a contributor, you all have that opportunity. I can tell you how to do it. It's not the easiest thing, but it can be done. So over the past, 6 years, this story has been developing. I think we're all really tired of seeing these 6 basic sound bites, and some stories have all of them, and most of the stories have some of them. Abandoned horses, old sick horses. The ban backfired, therefore we've got this terrible situation. Congress overturned the ban. As instead of saying some sneaky senators took the language out of the Farm Bill, they say, oh no, Congress wanted to reinstate slaughter. We've all seen those stories, and they're hugely frustrating. The GAO report being a big wet kiss from Max Baucus to the ag industry. Humane processing. Each one of these stories is widely used. This one, animal rights activists. I think most of us here do not consider ourselves to be animal rights activists. Horse owners, horse professionals, knowledgeable people, yes, academic, sorry. I was trying to go in for the 3 syllables, and I'm a little too nervous to do that, so we'll just go with 2. People thinking that PETA is behind this. Why the beef over horse meat? This is kind of a recent one. It's an emotional issue. Meat is meat. Horse is no different from cattle. And then there's the whole fascination with it being a cultural taboo instead of a food safety issue. We've all seen this. It's a dietary staple in foreign countries. Foreigners know best. It's low fat and high protein. Healthier alternative to beef, promise of Chavel. This one. You'd have to eat 500 horse burgers a day. The whole food safety denier argument. No evidence of a health threat. It's just a labeling issue. it's, or it's just an Oklahoma issue. And if you're not from Oklahoma, shut up and go away. So this kind of thing really needs to be addressed. It's hard to do it, but it needs to be handled. If people don't challenge these false stories, they will continue to repeat. But this is what it's really about. It's a huge food safety risk for consumers. As Paul was talking about, massive wastewater violations. The business is an environmental predator. It kills economic development. It lowers property values. It's a waste of US tax dollars. It's a public issue. You very rarely see the stories articulated this way, and as somebody who is constantly thinking about how to frame this story, how to cover the news part of it, but also explain to the public what it's about, these are the things that I think are the hardest hitting issues because they matter to taxpayers, they matter to consumers, they matter to lawmakers, and when you want to influence people to use the right stories and not the wrong ones, you've got to make sure that you talk to the right, you've got to target an audience. You don't want to spend a lot of time trying to re-educate somebody who doesn't have a platform for spreading more disinformation. So you want to make sure, if you're going to counter false stories, pick a good target that you can influence who influences other people. You want to look for thought leaders. Okay, so information is a tool, not a gift. What do I mean by this? Paula and everybody here today has brought forth different kinds of information. The phenylbutazone study, the GAO report, the wastewater issues. There was a veterinarian in Tennessee, and she's a great example of using information as a tool and not a gift. And what I mean by that is, when I write a story, or when someone puts out an 18-page letter, or a response to the GAO report, or a phenylbutazone report, and it appears in Facebook or in Twitter, there are a lot of people who just hit like. Oh, I like that. That's treating information like a gift. If you just share it within your Facebook group and you're preaching to the choir, it's treating it like a gift. I do not kill myself for nothing, and none of us kill ourselves for nothing, to give information to other people as a gift. It's a tool. Every single thing that I write, all the good information that people here produce, they do it so that you can use it. This veterinarian did that. She took, let's see if I can do this. Here she is. That's not really her, but stock photo. She took this story that I wrote on Paula, and she then went and she got the email addresses for 300 mayors in Tennessee. They had a bill coming up. They were discussing, I think it was called the Nicely Bill. So she spent a lot of time. She gathered up the emails. I think she picked them for towns that were of 10,000 people, because she knew that what happened in Paula's town was going to be important to these folks. So she put that together with an email, and the email said, there's a bill coming up, this is the number, this is what it's about, this is what it means to you. You've never had a slaughter plant in your backyard, you need to know it. Here's the article. Make sure you contact your legislator and tell them, don't you dare vote on this bill, don't let it pass. They got on their shoe phones and they called their legislators. And so the veterinarian sent this great note to Paul, and she said, I thank you so much for everything you've done for horses, and I want you to know that I sent this out to the 300, and they called the legislators, and she said, I think that helped kill the bill, because the legislature got a record number of phone calls against this bill. And I thought, you know, when you're writing for very little or for nothing, that's what you live on. So, well, I figured I better check and make sure that's right. Because when you write for the media, you know, you hear stuff, and we all know what happens if you don't bother to check and make sure that it's true. So I called this lady, Janice Santani. Paula gave me her number, and I said, I can call her up and see if, in fact, this story is true. So I called her up, and I said, you know, good afternoon. Janice. My name is Vickery Eckhoff. I write for Forbes.com, and I wrote an article, and she stopped me and she said, I know who you are. I handed your article out to my colleagues. That's what you want, and this is what you got. R.I.P. Bill. That's using information as a tool. Are there some journalists here today? Okay. Well, okay, so most of you are advocates. I was hoping there would be some more journalists. So for the journalists who are here, you'll be hopefully sent a lot of information by everyone here. And all the advocates will be sending the information. It doesn't matter what it's about, whether it's about wastewater issues or wild horse issues or food safety issues. But information needs to be used as a tool, and particularly a tool that has proof. You don't want to just send numbers out. You want to link to, you want to support them. You want to support them with proof, which is something the other side never does. So these are just a few tools that are easily shareable. Oops, wait a second. I meant to use this thing. Articles. And, you know, I write these articles, I include things in them like photo galleries. So this little one with the laser on it is a 10-slide photo gallery that shows what horse slaughter did to Kaufman. And so right there in that one article, you've got visual proof and you've got a story. It also has got another one of my photo galleries attached. How many congressmen does it take to screw a horse? And this is the Charlie Stenholm is the cover model. And then this, the 18-page Paula letter that she just described, which has got all this great stuff in it. You know, it's got tax returns, it's got the wastewater stuff. It's available in PDF form, emailable. Great tool. John Holland's upcoming GAO peer-reviewed report. Anne Marini's food and chemical toxicology study. And by the way, when you send out stuff like this, journalists really don't have very much time, so it's always good. Send your report, but write a synopsis of it. Make it personal to them. This story I wrote on the drug issue because it's hard to understand, and Dr. Marini and I spent a lot of time on the phone together, and she explained things to me. So I was able to write this, and it appeared in Newsweek. And what was so great about that, and Dr. Kulikowski was also quoted, and Dr. Nicholas Dodman, was that it talked about not just phenylbutazone, the risk of that. It directly addressed the you'd have to eat 500 horse burgers story. And it killed it. That's a great story to use to combat that false soundbite. Show and tell. When possible, bring this. I took these to a radio interview. It was a Food Network radio program in Brooklyn. They interviewed every major chef. I sat down and I said, I want to show you something. And I took it out, and I took out a pair of rubber gloves, and I said, we can open these, but you're putting on the rubber gloves. Well, they didn't want to do that, so I said, just read the labels. That's what this is about.
What's in there? What are those?
I don't have my glasses on. Banamine, Bute, Gastrogard. This is... I credit Susan for giving me all my drugs. She's my supplier. And I left my big bag of drugs at home. So yesterday I yelled, Susan, can you give me some more drugs? And she looked at me like, shh, keep that quiet. But in any event, use these. You know, this is the best way to show somebody that it's banned, that it's dangerous, that there are lots of them. Visual proof. And then to combat that story that only animal rights people are behind the move to address horse slaughter. This is on Animal Welfare Institute. It's an exhaustive list of all the people and groups who are opposed to horse slaughter. So it shows that they're real people, that they're the public, not just some small group that can be ignored. I sent this map out to a reporter who kept claiming that if you have horse slaughter plants in the United States, that they're going to have a nice, short, easy route to the slaughterhouse. And so here are the plants in Texas, here is Chavel, here are the Canadian plants, here are the plants in Mexico, and then here are the other ones that have been proposed recently. You have a good piece of visual proof. People can automatically say, I get it. But you'd have to write a very long paragraph in order to explain that. Who was it that showed this? Was it you, John? Oh.
Yeah, mine was a little simpler.
Well, and the person who did this has done several different versions. These are the lobbyist organizations and politicians, and you know, it's really hard for a lot of journalists and you know, people who are thought leaders who have an impact on this issue to visualize how much money is being spent on this issue by people who economically benefit from it. So, proof. Okay. I'm going to talk about chefs now because chefs are huge thought leaders, and they can create huge disturbances, and every time a chef gets a story in the paper about how they're going to serve horse meat, I get a lot of calls. Will you join our boycott? Here's a petition. And then I see a lot of stuff on Facebook. People are really upset about it. And I usually try and tell as many people as I can, this is being handled. Well, in any event, so getting back to that model of the veterinarian in Tennessee who used an article to inform and change this bill, I was very inspired by that. So I got on my shoe phone and I've actually contacted a lot of chefs. But the first chefs I contacted were the owners of M. Wells Dinette, who were going to serve horse meat tartare in Long Island City, Queens. Great idea, right? So they were kind of my first test case in reaching out to people who really have an impact on this issue in the worst way. And so I got their sous chef on the phone, and I just want to bring up something Victoria said yesterday, which is when you're reaching out to the opposition, you can't do it to inform them. You have to do it to open up a dialogue. And you know, there are certainly times when I've been very, very worked up about having to speak to somebody that I thought was entirely doing the wrong thing. Case in point, the last person I interviewed was Rick de los Santos. But before I did that, I said to myself, you have got to take all the tone out of your voice, talk to him, find out what he knows. Once you find out what he knows, then you can tell him what he doesn't know. So that's what I did with the sous chef. I said, okay, what can you tell me? A good starting point for talking to people that are perhaps going to be your biggest opponents. What can you tell me about the horse meat you'll be serving? Where is it coming from? What kind of horses? What do you know about them? And then I let him talk. Well, my supplier says that he can get me some horse meat from Canada. It's from U.S. horses, and they're very well treated. And I said, do you know anything about drugs they may be taking? Oh, no, they're all, you know, they're all raised for this. I said, you know, I don't think that's really true. Do you mind if I tell you a little bit about that? I didn't say, listen, buddy, you're all wrong. I'm going to straighten you out. I said, do you mind if I tell you about this? And he said, no, please, because I don't want to do anything that's unethical. I don't want to do anything to hurt my customers. They're business people. They don't want to hurt their clients. They're not out to do a bad thing. They're just not informed. So I said, okay, I told him about the whole drugging issue. And I said, do you mind if I send you some information about that? He said, no, please do. Very open. And I felt at that point that as soon as he has that information, he's informed about the health hazards, and if he's a businessman, he's not going to serve this. Well, I sent it, and at the time I sent it, I said, I'd also like to follow up with you and ask you, you know, about food safety. He said, sure, fine. Well, after that happened, the restaurant got bombarded by phone calls. They turned their phone off. They said they got death threats. You know, PETA was threatening, you know, the usual story. And so I was not able to do any more follow-up. But as it turns out, they didn't serve it. They didn't serve it because they were bowing to the community and trying to respect people's values, which is what the New York Times repeated that they said. They didn't serve it because they couldn't get any legally. They found out they couldn't get any legally. They found out that it was bad for consumers, potential health threat, and they just didn't pursue it. So, you know, the great thing about being a journalist is you can call up people and find out what they know, and then you can be pretty sure of what they're going to do sometime. Same situation with Peter McAndrews of Montsou in Philadelphia, who is the most recent victim. And I say victim because I don't think any of these guys would stick their heads out for publicity if they knew there was not a chance of them being able to do what they set out to do, which is, and in this guy's words, he wasn't out to create a sensation. He wanted to do something for his customers. You know, there's a huge movement now in extreme foodieism. You've got people writing articles about how to butcher your own pigs. It was on the front page of the New York Times. Lots of stories. There was one recently about the newest thing is to eat invasive species. So they're feral hogs. So now there are recipes for how to, you know, shoot and serve up feral hog. But in any event, so I went pretty much through the same process with this guy. Again, he had a Canadian supplier who said that he could get him some horse meat. And I said, you know, I've just been talking to the FSIS. You're not going to be able to get that. It's illegal. He's like, really? I said, yeah, sure, I'll send you the email. And in fact, I just received it. One of the few pieces of information from the USDA that I sought and got, which happened to be correct. Most of it has not been. And I sent it to him, and I also said, and if you don't mind, I'm going to send you a food safety article. So I sent him the, that's the FSIS email saying he couldn't get any. I sent him this food safety article from Newsweek. I also sent him Dr. Marini's report. And he was very nice. He said, why don't you come into the restaurant, we'll sit down, we'll have a glass of wine. And that's what you want. You want somebody who's uninformed to welcome you in. And so I said, great, I'd love to. So I sent him all the stuff, and then I followed up, and I said, so when can I do that? And he never responded. And the reason for that is that chefs don't want to talk about food safety, not publicly. They want to talk about great recipes and making a splash and the next big thing, but they don't want to talk about food safety in any event. So as a result of doing that, using that information, RIP horse meat, but also RIP free glass of wine for the Vic. That's okay, that's a cost I can live with. And by the way, I'm going to Philadelphia on Thursday, and I am going to go in there and demand my free glass of wine.
Vickery, have you been following, there was a restaurant in Toronto that was going to be serving horse meat, and of course they can get it.
I don't bother with Canadian restaurants. Okay. You know, there's a limit to what I can do. But you know, that's an entirely different proposition. I'm not even going to stick a toe into that one. Okay, media. All right, so what good can you say about the media? Before I came up here on Friday, I left a phone message for a reporter from USA Today in which she used every single one of those phony sound bites. And in fact, the thing that I love was her quoting Dave Duquette saying that horse abandonment was up 3,500%. And how I
Is that Aaron Burnett?
No, well, that's Aaron Burnett.
Yeah,
but this.
She's the one who said that.
No, I think her name was Amanda Oglesby. And so if you hear a dog barking, that's my phone, that might be her. Maybe I'll put her on speakerphone. Anyway. So in any event, there's just so much bad media, which of course kills me, and particularly the level coming from the New York Times, because the coverage that I used to promote for the New York Times for 2 years was its food coverage. I promoted its food and wine coverage, and so when I start seeing an entire series on exotic food adventures starring horse meat, it makes me want to, nothing good. So and you know, I write a lot of letters to journalists. The best thing to do, and you're probably all doing this too, is to call them. But if you're going to call somebody, you have to have a really very carefully constructed message. which is who you are, what's your credibility, make it always peer-to-peer. I can talk to these people pretty easily, one, because I write for some pretty good publications, but also I used to do food writing. So I'd always lead with that. You know, I used to do food writing, I promoted the Times coverage, you know, I am a fan, and what can you tell me about the article that you just wrote about this Italian chef in Moscow serving horse meat? And one of the kickers of this article, the last meat, was that the chef said, it's Viagra for Tatars. You know, it was... Sue Wallace picked up that line in her Facebook page. She said, we should market this to college boys. Based on that. She's, yeah, anyway. So, so I called up this writer who was stationed in Moscow. Actually, I emailed him. And I said, you know, I always start out the same way. I read your article with interest. I write for such and such. What can you tell me about so-and-so? So I said, what can you tell me about this chef and the horse meat? He said, well, the chef assured me it's from a really, you know, it's from a safe place. And I was like, okay, get your blood pressure down. And then I responded, they all say that. And of course, all of these chefs, all of these food writers, believe whatever they're told. So I introduced the food safety topic to him. I talked to him about the supply chain. I talked to him about the lack of regulation. How this is, as Paula said, it's a very different business. And then I told him about this Russian video of the Russian racehorses being clobbered with sledgehammers, which the Russians, some of them, put together a petition based on that video. And I said, I know the person who put that video up. Do you want to speak to them? So that, you know, it's time-consuming, but there is a way to reach out to every single journalist if you've got the time. Now, with regard to reviving slaughter of horses, this was a piece in the Wall Street Journal. I wrote a rebuttal to it in Forbes. Wall Street Journal serves up horse slaughter, well, whatever. I can't remember the title. But this was a story in which, it was a horse slaughter story, pro-horse slaughter, in which a Missouri old geezer found some abandoned horses that were mingling with the wild herd. And that was fit together with another story about what was going on in Missouri to try and get a slaughter plant going. And of course, the connection always is, you've got abandoned horses, therefore you need slaughter. Well, I found out something really interesting about this story afterward. And it turns out that the guy who wrote this story originally just wrote a horse slaughter story, and his editor said, we need some balance in there. And she added another unrelated story about abandoned horses and sandwiched them together as if they were one story. This way of doing journalism is really prevalent. There are a couple of guys who wrote a book called It's Worse Than You Think. And in it they talked about how the media did a terrible job of covering the election because they kept saying that both sides, conservative, liberal, did an equal amount of lying. Well, that turned out not to be true. One side did a lot more lying than the other. I will not say which is which. But the problem is the media thought, we've got to have balance. So we're going to treat them as though they did the same amount of lying. And that's why you get stories like these in which on one side you've got Sue Wallace and Dave Duquette, and on the other side you've got the Humane Society. And it's always a tug-of-war over phony humane issues. It's never the real nitty-gritty issues that you've been hearing about. So I alert you to this because you'll see a lot of this, you know, the phony construct of balance. And if you're ever interviewed, make sure you ask the journalist, who else are you interviewing? What's your focus going to be? Make sure you find that out, because if they're going to pit you up against Sue Wallace and Dave Duquette, you have the option to say, no, that's not the story. Every one of us here needs to be able to say to the media, no, that's not the story, and do it with great conviction and do it with information. The Huffington Post. I started writing for the Huffington Post, and by the way, I did that by calling up their tip line. They had printed a story by Reuters about how Sue Wallace was opening a plant in Rockville, and the Equine Welfare Alliance had just put out a press release saying that that was not going to happen. So I called the tip line and I said, that ain't happening, and I want you to print a correction. And of course, they never print corrections. So they said, do you want to do the story? So that's how I ended up writing for the Huffington Post. You can do that. So Huffington Post is, you know, they've got some decent stuff on there, but they've got a lot of stuff like this. Huffington Post tries horse meat and kind of likes it. And in it they said it's legal, but we couldn't find any anywhere. We don't quite know why. So we ordered some horse meat jerky from Wales, and we did a little taste test in the office. This was written by staffers. And the same day that that came out, I had written an article about the Oklahoma legislation. They did not publish it because I'm not a staffer. They published this stuff, but just so that you know, a lot of the bad journalism that you have is because staffers are young. They've got, you know, young, untrained staffs, and they do 3 articles a day. So there's very little fact-checking. Erin Burnett, of course, you know what the story is here. This is CNN. So, you know, you really got to push back on the media when you're in a position to do it. And when you push back, do it peer-to-peer. Put yourself on their level. Make sure you define yourself as an expert and you have the ability to back that up. Activists. You know, getting back to this whole idea that PETA and animal rights activists are behind this, that really bothers me. And unfortunately, the animal rights groups are happy to have the publicity because they can leverage that for other unrelated issues. And most of them don't know about horse slaughter, not because they're bad people, but it's complicated. And so, you know, so PETA just recently used the food safety scandal to talk about how, you know, terrible the situation is for other farm animals, and it certainly is, but nobody is helped when they're treated as being the same. So I'm not only looking at articles and figuring out how to respond to them, but I saw this one when Monsu in Philadelphia kicked off this whole, you know, weeks of speculation and discussion of people asking, what's the big deal over horse meat? Where's the beef? You know, this article was written by the executive director of Compassion Over Killing. You would think that somebody who was concerned about the killing of animals would not speak ignorantly about horse drugs. She spoke about horse drugs as not being a food safety issue. I was shocked by that. I was like, how do people who have no clue about this have the authority to write articles like this, misinforming other people? And on her Facebook page, she promoted it. Check out my op-ed in today's Philly Inquirer, read the horse meat scandal. Everybody is an expert. I called her. Same thing. Oh, I read your article. Can you tell me about those horse drugs? What do you know about that? She started talking. I said, do you mind if I tell you about that? And I told her about it. I told her what was different about horse meat. She had no idea. It's important to make a bridge to people like that because they've got a huge platform and they need to be educated. I can't do that on my own. People in the audience can do it. You know, I certainly have thoughts on when you reach out, how to do it. You know, I also reached out to the Government Accountability Project. When I interviewed Rick De Los Santos, I ended up being threatened by his attorney. So I ended up speaking to the GAP people who are doing a lot of work on ag-gag. What?
Take questions.
Yes. How much? Am I out of time?
Almost.
Oh, I better rush through. Okay. Anyway, what happened in Oklahoma? This didn't happen in Oklahoma. The public got, and by the way, Stephanie Graham is going to talk about the grassroots things that did happen in Oklahoma, but the media wasn't educated early on. The community leaders were never educated early on. This could be done. The Humane Society stepped in, and every article was about them, and they gave out the wrong information. They needed to be talking about wastewater. I found this out. I interviewed some of these legislators after the first committee vote where nobody talked about the issues at all. And I said, do you know about Kaufman? Did you hear about the wastewater problems? She said, this legislator who was against the bill, she said, no, groundwater is huge here. And the light went on for me. People need to familiarize themselves with the wastewater issues. Don't concentrate on the humane stuff. The nitty-gritty stuff, blood in the bathtubs, overwhelmed infrastructure, bad deal for taxpayers. Don't let them tell this story. I went after the newspaper, the Tulsa World, who put out 3 bad stories, all quoting the Humane Society, saying, it's cruel. Well, it is cruel, but that doesn't matter to the people who could actually call those lawmakers. The people who could call those lawmakers up and say, don't vote for this, are community leaders, like Paula, mayors. So I contacted this writer and I said, you got to talk about wastewater. So what happens, the next story he puts out, he said, there was a sewage overflow in Kaufman. I called him and I said, it was not a sewage overflow. I sent them that 18-page letter from Paula, and then a bunch of good editorials came out. So that's what needs to happen. So we got to stop this, this being repeated. And I think, this story didn't get told. This is the story that needs to get told. So educate yourselves on the wastewater issues, because that's the kind of thing that's going to get community leaders to call their representatives and say, hey, I'm a mayor of such and such, or,
I'm the city manager.
I'm the city manager. And also the public needs to be involved. I do believe that the coverage by the Humane Society got in front of the public, and the public never had a voice. They were considered to be animal rights people or out-of-state liberal tree huggers. And I did try and suggest to HSUS that they work harder to get to give the public a platform. And that conversation didn't go anywhere. Large groups like having that publicity, and it helps them, but it doesn't help the public have a voice, and it doesn't help the issue. So those are just a few of the things that that you can attend to when you see disinformation. Share it, peer-to-peer, prove your case. And by the way, one of the things, I'm just going to make a little shout out for someone in the audience who wrote this book. Timothy, you want to stand up? Reach out to people who are working on parallel issues and talk to them about it, because we can all help each other become educated.
What's the name of the book?
Every 12 seconds. It's about his work in a slaughterhouse.
Oh my.
Anyway, so that's it. Sorry, I think I went over a little.